Ohio State now needs not one, but two new offensive coaches and still needs a defensive coordinator. Lettermen Row is going to break it all down. The 41-year vet Tim May. I'm Spencer Holbrook. It's a late night edition, a Sunday night edition of the program. It is time to talk about Chip Kelly to the Las Vegas Raiders on a deal that is worth about $6 million annually. Ohio State was never going to match that. That is absurd for a college football offensive coordinator. So Chip Kelly goes to the NFL. The Buckeyes now needing an offensive coordinator. Oh, by the way, Justin Fry on Saturday morning leaves Ohio State for the Arizona Cardinals. So a lot of Buckeyes heading westward. So Ohio State's UCLA apparatus, both parts of that now gone. Of course, the Buckeyes still need to replace Jim Knowles. But we're here to talk about the offense now, Tim. Justin Fry gone to the Arizona Cardinals, Kelly gone to the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Buckeyes have quite a bit of turnover all of a sudden on this coaching staff after winning a national championship.
Yes, they do. But, as Ryan Day said soon after the national championship game the next morning, that he would expect some of his coaches to be prime targets for some folks. And sometimes you have to let things develop in the offseason. And, Pete Carroll getting hired by the Las Vegas Raiders, I don't know the connection between him, to be honest with you, much of the connection between him and Chip Kelly. But Chip Kelly tried to get into the NFL this time a year ago and failed. He wanted to go as an offensive coordinator somewhere. That's how he ended up in the lap of Ryan Day when Bill O'Brien suddenly took the suddenly open Boston College head coaching job. So the carousel, it keeps going round and round and round and round and up and down and up and down. So that was to be expected after a national championship run. I know it's hit some people a little bit surprising. Justin Fry was being cursed by some people at one point earlier in this year, and then suddenly he was as hot a commodity almost as there was on the Ohio State coaching staff at the end of the year with the way he and Mike Solioni, how do you know what I'm talking about?
Solana.
Yeah, with the he knows that I love him. I mean, I told him he's one of those guys that I was always keeping my eye on him. But now he and Chip Kelly are in the same city, so now they're going with the Las Vegas Rebels under new head coach Dan Mullen. But the point was the job that Justin Fry did in piecing together that offensive line that finally won a national championship, despite having two major injuries along the way, and another one. And then they had 7 iterations of that offensive line. So he had to be an attraction to someone. And, you've dealt with Justin Fry almost as much as I have. I've always found him to be an engaging dude, that seemed to know his stuff. But, sometimes it takes a while for things to come together. So at the end of the year, I was not surprised to see him become a hot commodity. And, of course, Jim Knowles, he went back to his home state, 150 miles from his hometown of Philadelphia, maybe closer at Penn State. So none of these are super surprising. Maybe the most surprising would be Justin Fry from the standpoint of he became a hot commodity in the National Football League, interviewing with one team and taking a job with another. That's pretty cool. But Chip Kelly tried to get the NFL, like I said, this time a year ago, to do what he enjoys most, which is run an offense with big-time talent. He just did that at the college football level. Maybe as good a talent collection as he's going to find in a relative sense ever in his next level now, the National Football League. So we'll see how it goes for him. But like I said, not really surprises. But, boy, you lose 3 coaches. If you lost 3 coaches and you had just lost a national championship game, that'd be one thing. But Ryan Day's riding on a high right now. I think you agree.
Yeah, I mean they've lost more than just those 3 though. Texas now targeting Allen Clark for an offensive line or an outside linebacker's job. He's the assistant to Larry Johnson there on the defensive line room. Riley Larkin, who's the third in command in the quarterback room, gets a lot of credit from Will Howard. He's off to the New England Patriots with Mike Vrabel. So I mean the coaching turnover just continues in this program right now, Tim, and it's not a great spot for Ohio State to be in because the carousel was already spinning for so long. So many positions got filled by high level coaches. But Ohio State's going to find good coaches. They pay well. They do all the things right. For the offensive line, and we'll get it out of the way, I don't think that there's anything concrete right now, but the names that I had for potential replacements for Justin Fry, Notre Dame offensive line coach Joe Rudolph. I think the Buckeyes have to take a swing there. He's a really good offensive line coach. They've got one on staff, line assistant Tim Drevno, who came with Chip from UCLA, really familiar with Justin Fry and Mike Soleni both. He's on staff. I don't think he's a good enough recruiter, to be quite honest, but I think he is a candidate. The other names that I had on there were Michigan State offensive line coach Jim McCalzick. The more that I talk to people, the more that I think there's a possibility that he might end up either in the NFL or sticking around at Michigan State. So we'll see what happens there, but he's really good. Clemson, the offensive line coach Matt Luke, who's the former head coach at Ole Miss. Penn State offensive line coach Phil Troutwine. I mean, the Penn State just poached Jim Knowles. Can you poach Phil Troutwine? It's up to Ryan Day whether he wants to. Kentucky offensive line coach Eric Wolford. Texas offensive line coach Kyle Flood. He's one of the best in the business. It makes a lot of money. And then Alex Atkins, the former Florida State offensive line coach, just got named the tight ends coach at LSU, but he also hasn't signed anything yet. That's not official. So, those are just some names to know. And I'm not saying that the name to know is in there, but those are names to know on the offensive line job now that Justin Fry is gone. But this offensive coordinator position, Tim, is ultra important for Ryan Day. Obviously, he had to do this twice last year. The second time he had a guy lined up in Chip Kelly immediately. I published a names to know, and 20 minutes later, Chip Kelly was already hired. So after Bill O'Brien left, Ryan had his guy. He knew it was going to be Chip. That wasn't really a search. I think this is going to be a search in the traditional sense. I don't think Ryan Day at lettermenrow.com, Ryan Day is a name to know for the Buckeyes offensive coordinator job because he could take play calling back over. Yep. After seeing the success and seeing his program respond to the way he handled this year without play calling duties, I can't see him going back to the play calling well. I think he will hire a play caller. Would you agree?
Yeah. But I mean, a name I'm interested in watching is the guy he named offensive coordinator 2 years ago, who's now had, 2 years to stew for want of another term, but maybe mature even more. And that's Brian Hartline, because he named him his offensive coordinator 2 years. I mean, you remember that. And we all sat there through the spring, is Ryan Day really giving up play calling? Hey, Brian Hartline, what do you know about play calling? You know what I mean? Blah, blah, blah. We went through that whole exercise. Well, this is 2 years later, and Brian Hartline definitely is not slacked off in terms of coaching, is definitely not slacked off in terms of recruiting. And, maybe he'll get another look because like what happened 2 years ago, push come to shove, if it doesn't work out again, Ryan Day could still be the play caller. See, there's a lot of weight off Ryan Day's back, shoulders, haunches, wherever weight collects on a head football coach who hasn't quite achieved that brass ring. Now he has achieved it, and he can be experimental is not maybe the right term, but I think he can be creative in terms of where he goes. But these are three major positions to fill on your coaching staff: the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, and your offensive line coach, which basically makes it all go. So, and the other thing is Tim Drevno. I mean, Drevno has a really good reputation. Yeah, he's had some ups and downs in his career based on where he coached and how that team did from one time to another. But everybody who talked about him behind the scenes this past year really liked him. So how much he had to do with that offensive line turnaround in the middle of the year, or really toe job, really, when they pulled it out of the snowbank twice, when it went off the road, how much he had to do with that big turnaround, especially in the guard center area, I guess we'll find out. But the bottom line is Ryan has some capable guys in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for all three of those positions. And we've already talked about the defensive coordinator deal. I mean, just because, you just listed off like 10 guys as possible offensive line coaches. And, that's a lot of guys. And my point being, you might have a guy that you feel really comfortable with in your own building because you got to watch him as a true head coach this past year. got to watch him do his thing. I'm not saying that's the route they're going to go at all, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him go in-house for at least one of these major positions.
Yeah, one of them I would agree. I think it's much more likely to be defensive side than offensive side. I can't see them staying in-house for the offensive line coaching job. And to be honest, if Ryan is going to give up play calling duties, I know Hartline has been learning and things, but I would still be surprised. I think the names that I have to know for Ohio State fans here are obviously Hartline and Day, just because either of them could take over those play calling duties from in-house options for Ohio State. The other ones are Toledo head coach Jason Candle. We know that Ohio State talked to Jason Candle about this opening last year.
Yes.
And, is it time for Candle to take the Ohio State offensive coordinator job instead of continuing his run at Toledo? He's been there for a long time. He hasn't moved up. Being the offensive coordinator at Ohio State or being the head coach at Toledo, what's more likely to get you to move up? I don't know. But if he wants to call plays and take a little bit of the load off, like maybe in the mold of what Chip Kelly just did, going from UCLA head coach, Jason Candle was a name absolutely to know, the Toledo head coach. The other MAC head coach to know, I would say, is Joe Moorhead. He's got play calling experience at Penn State, Oregon, Mississippi State, and Akron. He's the head coach at Akron. That tenure is not going well, but he is a brilliant offensive mind. But Akron is an impossible place to win at. He's likely going to be fired at some point in the next 2 years. Would Ohio State court Joe Moorhead, and would Joe Moorhead court Ohio State? That's a question for Ryan Day, but he's definitely a candidate to know because he's already in the state of Ohio. Other names, and this is a name that I know, would be of interest, is the Browns offensive coordinator Tommy Rees, who was the offensive play caller at Notre Dame, moved to be the offensive play caller in Saban's last year at Alabama, got a Jalen Milroe offense to the college football playoff, which, if you watched Alabama this year, was not an easy thing to do. They went to the college football playoff with Jalen Milroe at quarterback, and then Tommy Rees, when Nick Saban retired, obviously the new regime down there in Tuscaloosa brought in their guys, and so Tommy Rees just spent a year as the quarterbacks guru for the Cleveland Browns. He's now the offensive coordinator for the Browns, but Kevin Stefanski's still calling plays. If Tommy Rees doesn't want to be the non-play caller, there's a play calling opening at Ohio State. I think that there's something that Ohio State could explore if they choose to with Ryan Day. The other names that I've got are Washington Commanders pass game coordinator Brian Johnson. He played for Urban Meyer at Utah. He was previously the offensive coordinator with Florida. He was with the Eagles last year. He's with the Commanders this past year. He's got play calling experience in college football and the NFL, something Ryan Day really treasured last year as somebody who's called plays extensively at both levels. Rams passing game coordinator Nathan Shieldhouse. This is not any intel. It's just another name. He's a sharp guy, 34 years old, former Illinois quarterback. He's with the Los Angeles Rams right now as the pass game coordinator. And then lastly is Illinois offensive coordinator Barry Lunney Jr., who was at UTSA, now is at Illinois. Those offenses are really good. He's 50. He's already in the Big Ten. Again, those names, none of the names right there might be your new offensive coordinator at Ohio State. But those are the names off the top of my head. And right when Chip got hired by the Raiders that, came to my mind of like, okay, here's the candidates for Ryan Day to lay out. And if there are more candidates that pop up, we'll have that covered. But for right now, I think it's like Day, Hartline, Tommy Rees, Jason Candle, Joe Moorhead would be like where my mind really kind of goes right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't see that one happening, but I've been wrong before. But I just don't see that one happening just based on what I've observed the last couple of years. It's not knocking him, but I think a lot of people at Alabama were shocked when Nick Saban named him his offensive coordinator going into what he might have known already was going to be his last season. And they didn't get things straightened out with Jalen Milroe until a lot of heads stepped in there and said, you know what, let's run Texas offense from 2005. Let's see where that gets us. And so I'm not knocking him, but, I guess I'm just saying I think they can do better. So I'll leave it at that. The thing is, this guy does have to be when you look at it just on the front end, looks like he does have to be a quarterback coach based on the fact they've lost their quarterback coach. We'll see what he does in that regard. I mean, as you were talking about with Will Howard, I mean, there was a lot of progress made there with that young man in a short period of time. But we also know Ryan Day is a hell of a quarterback coach. So, he could fulfill that role to a certain extent. But I think it's going to be interesting. I'm telling you right now, I do not have I do not know right now where he's leaning, where Ryan Day would be leaning when it comes to an offensive coordinator as we speak. But I intend to find out as the week goes on. But you're right. I think it's a time where you sit back, you finish recruiting, and then you sit back and you make some really big decisions. And the other thing is, it's really in this age, it's so weird, man. Losing your offensive line coach, and your offensive coordinator, and your defensive coordinator a week or so before your final signing day would have been a disaster 4 years ago, right? Until the early
Yeah.
signing day came along, and if you lose your head coach, those guys can become a free agent, but not when you lose your assistant coaches, people who have signed early. So the good thing is they had most of the money in the bank when it came to, or most of the money out of the bank, I guess, when it came to the current recruiting class. But those are just my thoughts on it right now. Ryan Day, like we talked about him the last time we talked, um, I think he's become a better hirer and a better assessor of coaching talent. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, the big time name like you think it is. For example, this might be a big time name to some. It is to me, but Jason Candle is a very intriguing name. I mean, Toledo's worked very hard to keep him around, obviously, the last couple of years. But, it may turn out to be that Ryan Day says, hey, let's light that candle.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, because Ohio State needs a new offensive coordinator, and Ohio State needs a new offensive line coach. We already know they need a new defensive coordinator. I still think it's pretty early in that defensive coordinator search. The Buckeyes did a lot of recruiting last week. It is officially a dead period for a month. So now Ryan Day can get his, axe to the grindstone. He can start to, or whatever the saying is, he can really start to hone in on this. It's
Get his
late too.
binoculars out and check out
Yeah,
what's on the savannah.
he can start to hone in on these hires, and I think the offense I think defensive coordinator, I think they'll get a good one. Offensive line coach, it's been a mixed bag. Offensive coordinator, we'll see, because this is such a pivotal hire for Ryan Day, because he knows that he could just take it back himself if he wanted to.
Yeah.
But I think he knows, for the better of the program, that it's better if he's the CEO. So we'll see what he does. Like you said, it's still really early in this process for all three of those openings. We'll have it covered at lettermenrow.com. That's the 41-year vet Tim May. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Like the video below. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go to lettermenrow.com right now. We've got an offensive line coach hot board. We got a defensive coordinator hot board. We got an offensive coordinator hot board. We've got everything covered over there at lettermenrow.com. $1 for your first 7 days. That's where all of our content resides. That's Tim. I'm Spencer. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys tomorrow, because we're just going to talk about this all over again tomorrow. We'll see you guys then.